So I'm speaking today with Avezu Fanta, who is on schlichut in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
A short series of video interviews on the Israel Connections YouTube channel. In the coming weeks, I'll be speaking with Jews of Ethiopian descent to discover how they've acclimatized to living in Israeli society and what different roles they have adopted. Now, today I'm speaking with Avezu, and as people who are watching this interview can probably see, I've transported myself to a SIGD event just to be there at least spiritually for this particular interview. I've never been to an event like this in reality, but at least this is giving me some kind of inspiration for talking to Avezu today. Now, Avezu, please tell us, what is your role? You're working at the Philly Hillel Center, based in Philadelphia. Who sent you there, and what role do you have there at the Philly Hillel Center?
So I was, this is my second year. So in 2000 and like in the end of 2019, I moved to the role of Israeli Fellow. So Israeli Fellow, it's like very interesting job in the Jewish Agency. So we moved to North America. I'm located in Philadelphia. I work with Temple University and also with Westchester University, that also located in Pennsylvania state. And I work with Jewish students, and I also work with non-Jewish students. But majority of my job, it's like connected people to Israel and explain them what is Israel and what is Judaism, and also like explore together what is diversity of Judaism. And it's very important, especially in this day, and especially also in North America, because a lot of people have the concept that Jewish American are just white people, or all the Jewish people are just white people. And for me, as someone that live in Israel and was living in neighborhood with Moroccan, Yemen, Russian, and all this diversity Jewish people with very like background and different history. So for me, it's very important to show them like, yeah, like this concept of Israel of white colonialism or white people, it's not right. Like Israel have a lot of diversity, a lot of different background. So this is basically my job, to show people like the different culture in Israel, also like connect Jewish people to the Israeli country.
So you said this is your second time around in this role, is it? So how long have you now spent living in the US in this center?
In August, I will be like 2 years in USA.
Okay. Just since we're talking about the role that you have there, with what's just happened with the Gaza conflict, did this accelerate some of the things that you do? Did it put pressure on you to provide information on what Israel is doing in its defense?
Of course, I think the Israeli Palestinian conflict, especially in USA, I never like think about the Israeli Palestinian conflict as Israeli. When I live in Israel, I never think about it oppress and oppressor, like white people oppress brown people. But when you move to USA and you understand the narrative going here, you are like, oh my God, like it's not the full story. How you approach like this narrative to black as a white and white, like white oppressor, the colonists, Jewish people, European people, and the Palestinians are brown. So for me, it's the first time. I knew it for the beginning when I come here from the language, but this week and this month was the first time to really like speak with people and tell them like it's much more complicated than Black people oppressed by white people. It's not the story. This is not really the story. It's not about race. It's not about ethnicity. It's really about two people that really believe that this land, that they really belong to this land. So it was hard, of course, but also like be in front of these people that speak language, especially as a Black woman. When people tell me like, you are in the side of white supremacy, for me, it's really hard, because as Ethiopian Jewish, as someone that's very Zionist and proud Zionist, like Zionist Ethiopian Jewish Israeli, when people erased my history by white colonialism and by white supremacy, it's very hard to speak with them. And I don't like this idea. And I think this week was so hard for me to explain to people like, stop to brush everything by white and stop to brush everything by Black. Sometimes your race things or your race idea or your race conflict, it's not matched to people like other issue in the world. And sometimes I really succeed to do it. And sometimes like people will not allowed to listen to me and tell me like, we don't care that you are Black. Eventually you are Jewish, Zionist, and you are white. So it's sad, but also like, I cannot say more. Like, this is the language right now. It's very trendy. And if people don't want to sit and read history and read about other history, Moroccan history, Yemen history, Ethiopian Jewish history, and not just focus about European Jewish history. So I think this is their problem. If they want them, like if they want something to fit their narrative, eventually they are not listening to me, because I'm not fit the narrative. I'm not fit the narrative of Jewish colonialists that come from Europe.
We're going to come back to this subject a little bit later on in our discussion. I'm going to come back to it, but I want to go back first to get some idea of your background. Please tell us how your family originally came to Israel from Ethiopia and settled there. I believe you were too young to remember this.
So I was come to Israel when I was 6 months old. So I probably, people will consider me as someone that grew up in Israel, and people will tell me, Avezu, you are the first generation. But I have a lot of memory, and I have not my memory, of course, my parents' memory. But my story began in the early 80s. So my family live in Teda. It's a village in North Gondar. It's North Gondar, it's like the North Ethiopian side. Ambover, actually, it's like the famous village of Ethiopian Jewish. So Teda, it's basically near to Ambover. So my uncles, my father, brothers, was doing the Operation Moses. It's not Operation Solomon, it's very different. And they start to walk into the border or Sudan. And because my father was like in the beginning of marriage with my mother, so my father decided not to walk with them. And it was like telling them, send me a letters when you come to Sudan and tell me like if I need to do this journey and not to do this journey. So my uncles after 6 months sent my father letters and tell them, don't come. People die in the way to Sudan. Your wife, my mother, she's pregnant right now. Don't do it. Like, stay there. We will take care of you. Don't worry. You will come eventually to Israel. So my father decided not to come to Israel. And after 7 years, he heard for my uncle that he in Israel, and also the Israeli government allowed to bring a lot of Ethiopian Jewish from Addis Ababa, but we were living in Gondar. So my father and my grandmother and all like the majority of my family rent a car to drive to Addis Ababa. And we drive to Addis Ababa and we meet with the Jewish embassy member that was open a refugee camp for a Jewish Ethiopian. And we meet them there and we stayed there, I think, for 1 year. This is why my mother told me. I also born there. But she told me like we stayed there for 1 year. And it's very strange because a lot of people say that it was so hard to live in the refugee camp in Addis Ababa. But my mother don't remember that our time. She remembered that we rent an apartment. And it's not was so hard because the Jewish agency member was helping a lot with money and all these things. And also my brothers, because in this time, my mothers have already like 6 children. So my brothers was learning in the Jewish school of the Jewish agency school in Addis Ababa. And one time in the middle of the night, they tell them like, in Saturday, they're gonna be like big operation. And my mother was like, Saturday? But it's Saturday, we need to rest. And they tell her, no, don't worry, the rabbi approved the case. Our rabbi approved to do the Saturday because there was a war going in Ethiopia, by the way. A lot of people don't know that. And my mother was like, okay, pack everything, rush. We have 48 hours to run away from Ethiopia and go to Israel. And this is basically how we come to Israel. We come to Israel not in Saturday, we come in Friday before the Shabbat. And we come to Israel, to Ben Gurion airport, and then we live in Jerusalem for 4 years.
So that's quite a story. Now that you come to Israel at that time, as you grew up, what sort of a social circle did you mix with? Were you mostly amongst fellow Ethiopian Jews as you grew up?
So I all the time say to a lot of people that I have like, I don't want to say different, but after 4 years in Jerusalem, in Givat HaMatos, it's like basically a place of all the Jewish immigrants that come in the early 90s. It's not just was Ethiopian, it also was Russian, Argentinian, and a lot of people that come in the early 90s to Israel. So it was like a neighborhood of immigrants. But I don't know, my father quickly understand that if we live in a place that just our Ethiopian place, we are not come forward. We are not like achieve the goal to assimilate to the Israeli society. So he decided to move to Nes Ziona. And Nes Ziona, it's in the center of Israel, but it was a place that not a lot of Ethiopian people live there, not of a lot of Ethiopian community. And also he decided to send us, me especially, to a national Zionist school, religion school. So if you ask me, the first time I understand what is racism and what is like be like different, it was when I was 16, when I decided that I don't want to go again to religion school because I want to experience non-religion school. But until when I was 16, I never understand what is like racism because my school was very traditional, very like religion school. And all the things that they teach us, it was like, be good Jewish, like be good woman Jewish. This was the idea. So we never focus about you are Yemen, you are Moroccan, you are like Ethiopian. Like call us color blind or something like this. I don't know what happened. But really when I was like moved to non-religion school, I really understand like what is like living as a Black people or as Ethiopian Black people in Israel. But until then, I was like living in very like close world of religion. So I didn't see colors. I see like how I can be like really good Jewish, like really like religiously good Jews. And when I moved, when I was 16 to non-religion school, I understand what is racism and I understand the reality of Ethiopian Jewish people. Because I came less religion, I came like, I want to focus more about the society. And I really understand what it's been like, how it's to be Ethiopian Jewish Black in Israel. I can say I never experienced racism, okay? like face to face. Okay, maybe it was like okay, but face to face, I never experienced racism. But I go to a protest when I was 17 with my brothers and with my sisters, and I understand like what is racism and how we need to fight against racism, especially when I moved to non-religion school. And then I come to the IDF when I was 18. And I must to say the IDF, it's very critical, important things to the society in Israel, not just about like military that protect Israel. I think it's the first time a lot of Israeli meet Ethiopian, Arab Israeli, Druze Israeli, something that you never like think about in the society. You know that it exists, but you don't like meet them. But the IDF, it's like micro society for all these people. And I think it's the first time I meet a lot of people that I never thought that I will meet them. If you ask me when I was 15 in the religion school, and I was lieutenant, and I was stay 4 years in the IDF. It's a lot, by the way. A lot of people tell me 4 years, but yeah, I love the IDF. But I never like experienced racism. But it's not say that racism it's not exist in the Israeli society.
Yes, we'll talk about that as well in just a moment, Avezu. I wanted to look at how Ethiopians have managed to integrate into Israeli society. To begin with, a lot of Ethiopian Jews couldn't speak Hebrew and were not accustomed to the vagaries of living in a country like Israel, which was totally different from where they'd come. As the demographic of the Ethiopian community has changed, with more young people growing up like yourself, going through the same life cycle as other Israelis serving in the IDF, has this now led to a much better integration of Ethiopian Jews into Israeli society as a whole than we saw in the very beginning?
Yeah, of course. I think like the Ethiopian society, if you are especially compare us to our parents' generation, it's different, very different, like goals, very different things. But I want to say something. I never understand how my father understand Hebrew so quickly. But late in my life, like my father tell me that when he was young in Ethiopia, there was a school, Jewish school that called Ort, and he studied Hebrew when he was young. So my father come to Israel and know already Hebrew. So you have like a lot of people that already know Hebrew because they learn in the early life Hebrew when they live in Gondar. But our goal and my father and my mother generation, it's very different, because for my father and my mother, the goal was like to achieve the Zionist dream, to come to Zion, to build their life, to come to Jerusalem, to come to Israel, to build collectively, to be like in the Israeli society, in the Jewish homeland. This was the dream, very basic dream. For us, for my brothers and sisters, live as a community, also a generation, that Jerusalem for us is a fact. Israel, it's a fact. It's not a dream. We live and grow up in Israel and Jerusalem, that it's a fact. It never was a dream. I never was like thinking about Jerusalem as a dream or as a Zionist dream. For us, it was a fact. So we have like different goal, different achievement, and different experience, of course. And if you ask my fathers and my mother about racism, they tell you, oh, it's nothing. We are here. This is enough. If you ask my generation, we tell you, no. We need to fight against racism, and we have like different experience. But if you ask me, and a lot of people don't agree with me, this is my personal, I think Ethiopian women achieve much more than Ethiopian men. And I think like our problem in the society, especially in the Ethiopian Jewish society, it's more about the men than the woman. I think like the barrier, or a lot of people want to say like racism. I think women in the Ethiopian society in Israel don't have a lot of problem with racism than men. And my goal, it's like to approve the Ethiopian men society in Israel than women, because I really think that women don't have a problem like to achieve the goal. I don't think like they face racism than men, that Ethiopian men face. This is what I think.
Why would you say that this is the case, that with men it's more difficult for them to deal with this question of racism? What are the inherent problems that they have which women are not facing? Do you want to elaborate on that point that you just made there, Avezu?
Yeah, I think police brutality will be more against men, less than Ethiopian women. I think men as Ethiopian Black will presume as more threatened, more like criminal, because this is the Western world idea about Black men. And I don't think like Ethiopian women like really face this stereotype. Like I was a lot of time in Israel face to face with policemen, okay? But the moment that was a black man with me, or Ethiopian one with me, was like excellent, and it was like different shift of things. But when I was like me alone, it was different case. They were like more comfortable, like more like, let's talk with you. So I really think Ethiopian men, especially when we speak about police brutality, face more problem in Israel than Ethiopian women. We have like a different, how you say that, different road how to achieve this goal, and different like barriers how to achieve this goal. And this is why I think we need to more understand that if we want the Ethiopian community become successful more in Israel, we need more to give our focus to the Ethiopian men, the Ethiopian women. And I know a lot of people don't agree with me that it's a gender base, but I really believe it's a gender base. Because as someone that I don't live like with a lot of Ethiopian community in my neighborhood, but most of the Ethiopian people that live with me, if we look about the demographic today, the Ethiopian women are very likely to successful that the men was grow up with me. So I really think it's a problem of Black Ethiopian men than just Ethiopian women. And if you ask me, I probably in the future will, my goal is like be very, vocally and anti-racist with the Ethiopian men, because it's very gender-based. And it's not just, by the way, it's not just the case of Ethiopian. It's, if you look about every ethnical group in Israel that face racism, the men will remind their like background, and the woman will achieve the goal.
So that's even in the Russian community, you would say that's the case?
Yeah.
So we've been talking about the concerns about the level of racism and discrimination against the Ethiopian community, which has culminated in some terrible events. In particular, we saw the killing of the young Ethiopian Solomon Teka by an Israeli policeman quite a few years ago. How is the level of harmony today between Ethiopian Jews and the rest of Israeli society? Would you think things are improving in this space?
Why it's a hard question. Improving? So in Israel, it's very different. When you want to say improving in what? Improving face to face to the policeman or police system. So we don't look about improving in global or like macro things. I know one thing. I know that a lot of things will improve and still improving in the policeman system. But also, I think I really see the problem with the police. It's not just about Ethiopian. I think it's about every minorities inside the Jewish community and outside the Jewish community. So when I say minorities inside the Jewish community, I mean ultra-Orthodox, Ethiopian, Middle Eastern, and all these things. And when I say outside, it's the Arab Israeli community. I think we have a problem with the policemen. Of course, I think it will be in the future, probably will approve. We have, that we have a lot of Ethiopian people inside the police. I don't know if it's really like improve something, but a lot of people get into the police. For my example, my cousin is in the police and he say this is the way to improve. People can disagree with him. I agree with him actually. I come also a lot of time to the police to explain them about police brutality, about racial profiling, and why it's so wrong to do it. But if you ask me about my community, if it's improving, it's so hard because I cannot speak about my community. I can speak about my area and I can tell you, of course, it's improving. Like from my age to my sister, by the way, she's 17. And I think it's improving a lot. I think like we don't think the same. If I was thinking about myself as Ethiopian first, and then Jewish, and then Zionist, and then Israeli. So my sister like thinking differently. Like my sister, she's like Zionist, Israeli, Jewish, and then Ethiopian. So it's also like how people measure improving. Like for me, improving, it's about your identities, much more little children, like much more young Ethiopian children like me. If they call themselves Israeli first and non-Ethiopian, I think it's improving. But if we are still stuck with Ethiopian Jewish, so I think it's like a problem. Because I don't view my sister and my brother that born in Israel as Ethiopian first. I see them like as Israeli first.
While we're talking about racism, I really have to ask you this question. How do you see the Black Lives Matter movement? Do you have any identification with Black Lives Matter, or do you have some concerns about the way the Black Lives Matter goes about its game?
So I was here when there was like the last protest of Black Lives Matter in Philadelphia. I was shocked, of course. But also there is a difference. I think there's a difference between Black Lives Matter as the organization. How you say that? Organization. Yeah. And actually like the movement or the people that really believe that Black Lives Matter, it's like, I really believe we need to improve the Black people lives. So no, like I will say that I don't support Black Lives Matter organizations because they associate with BDS, of course. And if people don't know what BDS, it's like the wild organization against Israel and against like Jewish people. So I don't support the organization, and I don't support also their ideas of the organization. And the first time when I come to USA, me as someone that became activist when I was 16 and 17, and majority of my goal was like to explain to the people in Israel, stop to see my color, like just see my character. Like before I'm Black, before I'm Ethiopian, like see my character, see like who is really Avezu. And Black Lives Matter, it's like different language than me. It's like, see my color first. So for me, it's like hard time to connect to Black Lives Matter because what does you mean, see my color first? If I against this idea, I don't want you to see my color first. Okay, it's like, you see black, it's okay. But don't like tell me because I'm black woman, I need to think about this and this and this, like hey, Z, and all these things, the same things. And this is basically what's going on in USA. Because if you are not think like in the idea of Black Lives Matter organization, you are trade. You are not really black people. And I don't like this idea because as a black woman that don't live in USA, that learn the history of USA later in my life, and my history was very different. I don't like the idea that they push me to one agenda that don't fit me just because I'm black. And I think this is the really colonialism. Like if you call people imperialist and you call people colonists and you call people white supremacy and you call people all these terms that go in USA, just because I'm black and I don't fit your narrative and I don't fit your ideas that you preach, the ideas that you preach, you decide to erase my history, to erase my entities. This is the real like colonialism. This is why this is how colonists like drive in Africa. They erase every history of African people, try to like push them other narrative, other history, because they understand more than them. And I don't like this idea at all. So I'm here for Black lives every day, but I think the organization, I think is lost his mind a little bit. And by the way, I was into 2016 when I was a student in Israel. My final research, like my final degree, was about Black Lives Matter and civil rights movement of Martin Luther King. And I was telling my professor, Black Lives Matter going in the wrong way. It's not the civil rights movement. It's not the same. It's really not the same. And my professor was argue with me and tell me like, no, it's the same. But later end of day, 2019, he sent me, Avezu, you're probably right. Yeah. I know that I'm right, but I think all these political identities and all this intersectionality and all these ideas about black, white, and put people in box, this is very dangerous. And it reminds me the 1930s, the Nazism, like when Hitler was putting people in a box. It's really the same, but it's different language. But for me, it's a very, very the same idea, and people don't understand that. And if we want to achieve to equality and people like really be free, we need to speak about boxes and speak about races, and we need to stop to speak about racism. We need to understand that activism, for me, it's educated. Like if I want to be activist and I want to be like at least change the Ethiopian Jewish people community life in Israel, it's educated. And this is why I push the Israeli government to put in the books, in the history books, not just European Jewish history, put Moroccan Jewish history, Ethiopian Jewish, Yemen Jewish, because I think it's very important. But what's going in USA, I cannot, I'm Zionist, so I cannot connect it with everything that they say, because eventually I'm Zionist, and Zionism is very bad word here. So.
Well, I should share with you that in Australia we're not immune from this, and what really bothers me is this intersectionality where the pro-Palestinian movement has hitched its wagon onto what is the situation here with our Aboriginal Indigenous population and their concerns about colonialism and white settlement. And they've seen here an opportunity, a political opportunity. They see a gravy train, a chance to gain political advantage out of the situation that really has nothing to do with them. So
that's why I say all the time, I think like use other history, like apartheid in South Africa, or the like Native American history. I think this is the problem. Like, it's a very cynical way to use other people's history. It's not the really matter about this history. They don't care. They don't care about Black people in the apartheid time. They don't care about Native American when Columbus come here. They don't care about Australia people, like how you call the native? Aborigines?
Aborigines.
Yeah, they don't really care. They just use it in cynical way. And I don't like it, because if you have a conflict with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and I live this conflict for a long time, just use our fact, our history. Don't use other people's history. I think it's very cynical. And I don't like when people use other people's history, when people call me, oh, you become the Nazi. And I'm like, how you say that? How you use other people's history to prove like your point? It's not fair. Like, use them because you don't care about this history. You just use this history to mark or like to say that your point and you are in the right side. And I don't like this way. I really don't like this. How people political intersectional, especially in the intersectionality theory, like how they shift the way and use like other point of history in a cynical way just to prove their point. No, if I as Israeli Ethiopian I never use like the Native American point. I don't say like my ancestor is native to the land and all these things like the Native American, although I know it's right, but I don't use their history. I really don't want to. I want to tell my history as Ethiopian Jewish and an Israeli. Why to use other people in a cynical way history, especially that I know you don't care about them. You really don't care about Black people in South Africa. And also the double standard, like focus about Israel. I don't like it. Like, why? Ask yourself, why you focus just about Israel when the whole world, very criminal and very like, not just all world, Middle East, okay? Let's focus about the Middle East. Lebanon, Egypt, Jordan, and all this country around us are discriminate, are the most racist country ever. You cannot be there as a Christianity because Muslim people are controlled in this people. So why focus about Israel? And this is the question about every people. Like, ask yourself, why you focus about Israel?
Well, let's get back to talking about you as an Ethiopian Jew and what the contributions are of Ethiopian Jews to Israel. We can go down this path. I agree with you in what you've been saying. Identity politics is a sickness that we have to get away from. Critical race theory, which comes out of this, is terrible, absolutely terrible. But we both agree on this, so that's we don't want to get too distracted, unfortunately. Please tell us what's been the great contributions that Ethiopian Jews have made to Israel. Please tell us how significant has been the arrival of Ethiopian Jewry in Israel.
Yo, it's so funny. Just for joking, okay? So today I was talking with my sister, and I was like, wow, Israel is so lucky that they have the Ethiopian Jews for the critical race theory, okay? Right now. So it was funny just to laugh about it, that I can be like the Jewish and the Black and play the both of the field. But if you ask me about Israel, of course, I think we contribute to Israel community more than values, like value of Ethiopian traditional. If a lot of people don't understand what is the tradition of Ethiopian, go educate yourself, but a lot of Ethiopian are really appreciate the older people. And it's something that every Israeli know if he's non-Ethiopian. They know that. Like Ethiopian really, really have like respect to the older people in the community. So we contribute a lot of the value. Also religion aspect, I think we contribute a lot because we challenge the orthodoxy. When we speak about orthodoxy, I speak about Ashkenazi orthodoxy because Ethiopian, if a lot of people don't know, was living in Ethiopia without the Talmud, without the Mishnah. So they live basically just with the Torah. So our law, it's very different. So we challenge a lot the people, the rabbinic law in Israel. And so I think like religiously value, a lot of value. I think people can, especially the non-Ethiopian people, can learn what is purely basic Zionism for the Ethiopian, from the Ethiopian community. When they celebrate the Sigd holiday, a lot of people understand like, wow. So, and if you look about all the community in Israel, like the Ethiopian community really have like spiritual connected with Jerusalem. Like it's a fascinate for me. Like for them, Jerusalem, it's like, wow. And a lot of people, like when they come to see like how we celebrate the Sigd, they understand that. But I think the Ethiopian community, I think they really contribute to the Israeli society by our value, like how we really, really save the 10th Amendment. How you say that? Like this?
We observe the 10 Commandments.
Yeah, and especially how to be respect, like to the older people in the community. People like, I don't know why it's weird for them. Like a lot of people, non-Ethiopian, my friend, when they come to my house and you see, and when they see me like how I connect with my mother and my grandmothers, they tell me like, wow, you're so much respectful. So yeah, we save like values very strong.
I want to ask you one more question. I want to ask you about the situation currently where there are still some remaining Ethiopian refugees left behind in Ethiopia who claim to be Jews and still want to come to Israel.
Yeah.
I've sent you a photograph which I'll put up on the interview of Isaac Herzog, who, as we speak, is only a few hours has become the new president of Israel, and as the head of the Sochnut, Herzog was pivotal in helping to bring so many Ethiopian Jewish refugees to Israel. But is Israel finishing the job properly, would you say?
So I don't have like so much, I don't know, like I don't in the idea or their, I would say that. I don't know if these people will come to Israel, okay? But if you ask me as Ethiopian people, like as Ethiopian Israeli people that live in the Israeli community, so this issue, it's very divide our community. So you have people in our community that tell like, yeah, they need to come. Of course, they need to come to Israel. And you have the other people that say like, no, they convert themselves to Christianity. And now they remember to be Jewish, so no. I think it's much more complex. But because we have Pnina Tamano, and if people don't know Pnina Tamano, she's like the secretary right now, also the new government that eventually will become a government today, tomorrow, or maybe fifth election, we don't know. but she's Ethiopian Israeli, and she is the secretary of people like for the new immigrants people that come to Israel. And she really pushed to bring all the Ethiopian people that remained and say that are Jewish that stay in Ethiopia. But I don't have idea about it, just because I really don't, how you say that? Like, I don't say I don't care. I just want to say like, I really don't understand like the full story beyond it. Like when I ask my mother, she tell me a lot of time, this is people that convert themselves and now they want to become Jewish. Okay, they convert themselves, but we say like Jewish all the time stay Jewish. So what do you mean? So I don't have the answer for that, but I really, really believe that Pnina Tamano, the politician, the Ethiopian Israeli politician, would do everything because she swear like to bring every Jewish people and every people that say that they're Jewish from the refugee camp in Addis Ababa.
Okay, well, that's a good point to finish there on this little note of ambiguity with you, Avezu. I just, before we go, I've noticed while we've been talking that you've got somebody lying on the couch next to you. You want to tell me who it is?
Ben Gurion?
That's Ben Gurion, is it?
Yeah, I draw Ben Gurion, but he's brown Ben Gurion. He's not the white Ben Gurion.
Has he got something to say to us? Okay, it's just a picture. Okay, I see. It looked like he was sleeping on the couch.
No, it's a picture of Ben Gurion, and it's the brown one. It's not the white Ben Gurion.
Well, thank you very much for talking to me today on the Israel Connection. It's been a real delight to speak with you. And I appreciate that you're doing a great job for Israel in the US at the moment. And may your career go to great heights as you travel through life. It's been a fascinating discussion today, Avezu. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. And I wish you in Australia. By the way, this is like my fantasy place to live after Israel. Australia.
Well, we have a need for schlichut here, so maybe in the future.
I know you have schlichut in Australia. I want to do schlichut in Australia, but don't send me to Australia. Okay. But I just want to say, like, be safe, of course. In North America right now, it's not really safe after a lot of anti-Semitic case. But be safe and remember, I don't know if I can say that. I'm Israel Chai. This is all the time why I say like, and I think Jewish people, especially in the diaspora, need to learn about other Jewish people in other diaspora, and it's very important to us to be united.
אני מסכים 100%.
אני גם מסכימה.